Episode 8 of the Digital Circus is about to change everything. With the highly anticipated Episode 8 still 2 weeks away from its premiere, Glitch, who usually drops trailers just 1 week in advance, released it now. Unlike some of the weird experiments they did, like the Episode 5 trailer, this one is packed with scenes and secrets that we'll break down later. But without a doubt, the most striking thing is that this truly feels like the beginning of the end for the series. Everything points to Caine being on the brink of madness after earning everyone's hatred at the end of episode 7. And it seems that to reverse this situation, we're going to get time travel with Kinger reuniting with Queenie, or Jax with his old buddies Ribbit and Calfmo, trauma, and some really bizarre stuff, like Bubbles' true identity being exposed. So join me as we unravel all of this and more, starting with the real protagonist. And of course, I'm talking about Caine? Let's start with the thumbnail, where we see Caine climbing a set of stairs and exiting what looks like a fake sky set. This is clearly a reference to the Truman Show, and beware, spoilers ahead for the Jim Carrey movie, where his entire life is a TV show broadcasted since birth, treating him more as entertainment for the viewer than as an actual person. Anyway, the important part is the end of the movie, where Truman manages to escape by walking through the exact same door we see in the trailer's thumbnail. This means that if Glitch and Gooseworks decide to keep running with this reference in the actual episode, Caine might just drop Truman's classic goodbye catchphrase. In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And that might just mark the beginning of the end for the circus. The opening scenes of the trailer narrate Caine's thoughts and insecurities through a classic 1920s silent film style story called The Heartless Lover. This fits perfectly with an AI that's incapable of understanding human emotions. We're told that the lover, aka Caine, has always wanted friends, but didn't know how to make anyone love him back. It then says that the harder he tried to impress people with his magic, the further he pushed them away. This makes it totally clear that Caine's crazy adventures are just his attempt to impress the humans in the circus with his powers, hoping they'll see how cool he is and want to be his friends. This essentially makes Caine an unintentional villain rather than a true threat to Ponami and her friends. Though, based on what the trailer shows later, that could change very soon. The opening cards end by stating that this is the story of a little AI who ruined everything, obviously referencing the events at the end of episode 7, where everyone finds out Caine has been manipulating them and modifying their minds against their will. It's highly likely that Caine, without even realizing it, is the one responsible for causing the humans to abstract, or at the very least, he bears a huge chunk of the blame. This whole intro makes it clear that episode 8 will focus on Caine and his attempts to fix his mistakes from the previous episode. Unfortunately, everything points to him doing it his way, and as we already know, that usually doesn't end too well for him. In fact, in a comment Gooseworks made a while ago regarding which character each episode would focus on, Jax was confirmed for the 6th, but for episodes 7 through 9, Gooseworks just gave us her classic, "You'll have to wait and see." Now that we know episode 7 wasn't exactly focused on a single character, it's safe to say episode 8 will focus on Caine having to learn the hard way that things aren't as simple as he thought. He'll realize his actions have severe consequences on the circus member's mental sanity, forcing him to redeem himself for his past actions and learn from his mistakes to finally get the friends he's always wanted. Or maybe, no. Throughout the trailer, we can hear Caine having a couple of conversations with himself, or possibly even with Bubble, who, as we'll see later, might be way more important to Caine than we originally thought. The first thing he says is, "Surely they don't want to actually leave me, right? I can solve any problem. I can solve this one. That's what this is. Just one big puzzle I need to solve." This shows us that this time around, Caine is going to stay in denial, clinging to the idea that he did nothing wrong, and pretending everything is fine. We actually see a scene where all the circus members are sitting on the couches from past episodes, only for the entire circus to suddenly start corrupting. This is a scenario that would be pretty familiar to Zubul, since they saw the exact same thing during their therapy session with Caine in episode 3. Zubul probably explains to the others that the structural integrity of the circus is tied directly to Caine's mental stability. So while they try to figure out a way way to fix all this, they're going to have to play along with Caine's adventures to keep everything from collapsing. Unfortunately, the ringmaster, in his desperate attempt to pretend everything is going to be fine, gets way more controlling than usual. He literally zips Pommy's mouth shut, likely after she tries to confront him about what happened in the last episode, effectively silencing her so she can't bring it up again. We also see him suddenly disappear alongside Kinger, right after Kinger probably tried reasoning with him to strike a deal and put an end to this whole madness. And speaking of madness, we have to talk about a character who seems to be taking on a much bigger role in this 8th episode. And of course, I'm talking about Bubble. It's super interesting that for a huge chunk of the trailer scenes, Caine is not accompanied by his loyal sidekick. Everything points to episode 8 starting off with Caine doing some reflecting inside his office, which, by the way, against all odds, actually seems to be his real office, not just a fake one he made up for the last adventure. This makes sense. It'd be pointless to create all those snow globes containing memories of past adventures just for a run-of-the-mill quest. Inside this office, we see him chatting with Bubble, only for the two of them to end up in a staring contest moments later. Here, the show might finally establish that Bubble is actually a manifestation of Caine's own thoughts, specifically the part of Caine that knows he's messing up and is completely blunt about it. We've seen good old Bubble do this plenty of times, contradicting Caine on multiple occasions, only for Caine to end up popping him. And that's exactly what he does in the trailer. It's highly likely that Caine's massive insecurities have caused Bubble to multiply into a swarm of intrusive thoughts, spitting out hard truths that Caine refuses to hear. He starts popping the Bubble clones one by one, but seeing that Bubble has no plans to stop, Caine decides to just get rid of him altogether, tossing him into an unknown location. It could be the cellar, or maybe that weird place where Abel got the admin keys in the last episode. Although it would also be pretty cool to see Bubble wandering through the various adventures Caine has created over time. However, getting rid of the original Bubble doesn't make the intrusive Bubbles disappear, it just makes them stop talking. It's possible that if someone pops one of these, they might actually be able to hear Caine's true thoughts. Because of this, the ringmaster decides to just pretend they aren't there and carries on with his master plan to fix everything. To do this, Caine comes up with an idea that's way too extreme for the fragile minds of the circus crew, dragging them on an adventure to experience the past. At one point, we see everyone looking super confused at Caine right before a portal opens up to a new adventure. It's highly likely this portal takes them to relive past adventures alongside crewmates who are now abstracted. We can spot this in scenes like the one where Jax is holding a mug of coffee or hot chocolate with marshmallows. It's identical to the one he's sharing with Calfmo and Ribbit in the photo in his bedroom. This was probably the last adventure they had together before Ribbit's abstraction, which is what changed Jax forever. In fact, in this exact scene, you can make out some shadows in the background. One looks identical to Ribbit's silhouette, while the other could easily be Calfmo, just maybe without his hat. This points to Caine's plan being to take everyone back to their happiest moments in the circus, trying to prove that being trapped in the simulation with him isn't all bad, and that they've actually had some good times. This plan might partially work, with Jax genuinely enjoying seeing his old friends again, even if deep down he knows it's all fake and just another one of Caine's manipulations. Actually, he might figure it out quickly because for a split second, we see a car falling out of nowhere into the circus. A lot of people are connecting this to Jax's flashbacks in the previous episode, where he remembers scenes of a neighborhood in a car driving down a road in the middle of a forest. So it's possible that Caine's glitches briefly morph Jax's memory of Ribbit and Calfmo into these car flashbacks, mixing them up with some weird goink-like creatures. Someone else who seems like they're going to suffer a lot from this plan is Kinger. We briefly see him looking extremely confused on the floor, only for a figure that looks a lot like him, but in a red robe, to approach him out of nowhere. This is obviously the first direct appearance of Kinger's wife, Queenie. It's something that hyped us all up, but sadly, it looks like it's going to severely mess with poor Kinger's head. He, more than anyone, would know that this isn't his real wife, since his actual wife is abstracted and locked away in Caine's cellar. However, it's highly likely that in a moment of weakness, just like Jack's, Kinger will let himself get swept up in the lie for a bit and simply enjoy that beautiful memory with his wife. A curious detail is that during these types of scenes, we see Zubul running through the dark looking absolutely terrified. Since Caine isn't exactly Zubul's biggest fan because they constantly complain about everything he does, it's possible that instead of sending them to a nice past adventure, he tosses them somewhere dangerous so they can reflect the hard way. On the flip side, even though it seems inevitable that everyone will eventually realize these emotional adventures are fake, Caine might pull another mind wipe. He could modify their minds again so it takes them longer to realize that both the adventure and their abstracted loved ones are just illusions he created. We already get a couple of shots of Jax and Ragatha staring at their hands as if reliving the memory of the very first time they arrived at the circus. We even see Ragatha locking eyes with Kinger, which might be a flashback to their very first meeting inside the simulation. Either of these two scenarios would be an awesome opportunity to explore our beloved characters' pasts. It would bring back familiar faces from previous episodes, as well as characters we never got to see before Pomni arrived at the circus. But this whole charade is bound to fall apart sooner or later. They'll end up feeling even more furious at Caine for what he's done, pushing them to try harder than ever so that this time for real, they can finally find the real exit. For a few moments, we see Caine standing in the dark with tiny electrical sparks running across his body. This is a direct result of what happened with the buttons in the last episode. In the trailer, we also spot a couple of flashing lights in those exact same colors, proving that deep down, Caine knows exactly what choice the humans actually wanted to make to escape the circus and leave him alone forever. Caine's growing instability, which is bound to make the entire world collapse sooner or later, will force them to rush to find a real exit. It's highly likely that Kinger will be the first one to abandon his adventure with the fake Queenie. He might return to Caine and try to talk to him, just like we see in the trailer. However, Caine, being in deep denial, would probably just teleport him straight into someone else's adventure without a word. This would make Kinger the designated guy to gather everyone up, hopping through their respective adventures one by one to assemble a new plan. However, seeing that everything is going south way too fast, Kinger might propose a much more extreme plan. To buy them more time, Kinger could offer to sacrifice himself to reboot both Caine and the entire circus. This would leave Kinger trapped in the void, forcing his friends to relive all of Caine's adventures up to this point, giving them extra time to figure out how to escape. This kind of cliffhanger ending would definitely leave us dying to know what happens in the series finale. A lot of people actually think it's possible they will find a way to escape in this upcoming episode. We once again get shots of the CNA offices, but since everything looks practically empty and abandoned, it might just be Caine's recreation of the Macroverse. This could be the one place that brings Caine enough peace and mental stability for Kinger to execute his reboot plan. This would help Caine forget all the mistakes he's made. Though naturally, you'd expect him to just make them all over again since he's inherently a flawed AI. But an unexpected character might just flip all of this on its head, for better or for worse. There are a couple of shots hinting that someone is hiding. I say this because there are a few really random scenes. In one, we see Caine staring super seriously at a little colorful tube toy he has in his office, which we saw in the background of the last episode. At first glance, we could have easily confused it with the bomb Pomni has to defuse in episode 5. This gives us the idea that Caine might actually try to play through the circus members' past adventures himself. By putting himself in their shoes, he'd be trying to understand how they think and feel. That would be an incredibly interesting concept, and I really hope it happens before the series ends. We also see some sort of cage from a top-down perspective. This could be that thing he keeps on his desk, which might be a special adventure Caine holds dear. Maybe the very first adventure he ever created. Though, to be fair, it also looks a lot like Caine's giant fish tank, since from above it has the exact same shape. Actually, swimming inside this tank are those funny fish from the last episode, voiced by Zach Hadel, the voice of Charlie from Smiling Friends, and Senor Bello, the famous animator who created awesome stuff like Spooky Month. So it's totally possible these weird, charismatic fish will make a comeback in episode 8. However, when I mentioned a character hiding in the circus, I wasn't talking about the fish. I'm talking about none other than Bubble. It's highly likely that when Caine is staring him down, that's the exact moment he gets completely fed up with Bubble's comments and kicks him out of his office. We see some pipes bursting one by one with something traveling inside them. At first, you might think it's the circus crew escaping Caine's office, but in this scene, we also spot the balloon they used to enter in the first place, and we see them falling from pretty high up, so it's really unlikely to be them. After zooming through these pipes, Bubble would pop out in an unknown location. This is probably where we'll see that weird hand from the trailer. Even though it looks a lot like the blue grab pack hand from Poppy Playtime, it could actually be the real admin key that Abel mentioned in the last episode. The ones they found turned out to be fake and just part of Caine's adventure. But since we spot another one of these keys in the corner of Kinger's pillow fort before Pomni even gives him one of the stolen ones, we can assume these keys are real and extremely important to the circus. This would make Bubble the one working from the shadows to save his old toothy friend. But luckily, we'll find out the truth to all of this very soon when episode 8 of the Amazing Digital Circus finally drops. So stay tuned for more content on the trailer and a full breakdown of the episode once it's out.